So science has actually become one of the most dominant forms of knowledge, and there's also this institutionalizing of this kind of knowledge, both science and technology. But we also see that schools are also these centers that transmit knowledge of the sort, and they prioritize science as this, the form of knowledge. And so, given this setup, we as artists, when we walked into Madivala government school, which had kids from poor, socioeconomic backgrounds going to this school, being visited at times by scientists from the Astrophysics Institute, and already knowing that they communicate science a certain way, how did we want to communicate, or how did we want to open up dialogue on science, on astrophysics or astronomy with these kids?
So we had a 3-day workshop and all, and it was kind of a dialogue. It wasn't a this is what you have to do sort of workshop. So we led them through maybe a series of discussions and kept a question space open that would lead into different spaces. So the first day we worked with representing what you see in the sky through either images or performance, and then we finished that day with looking at video and footage of actual objects in the sky. The next day we worked with building spacecrafts with paper, and the last day we went into this idea of the journey, because we thought there was a huge gap between actually visualizing the sky and building a spacecraft suddenly, and we needed to connect this. So the third day was about this journey into space and what that meant for the children in terms of their imagination or in terms of their understanding.
Yeah, and we use performance primarily or enactment because we encourage the children to participate in their learning of space, in their learning of objects in space and how they relate to each other and how they move around each other. And we constantly saw them shift between using of their bodies and a depiction or a graphic representation of it, which was more of an exterior thing that they had to do rather than what we thought performance would do, which would be more of an internalizing of the process. And by that, we thought an inquiry would stem out of it. But both worked, I think, complementarily to one another. So, how did the satellites workshop work for you?
I think the satellite workshop was very interesting. It was a comfortable space for the children because they were used to the medium. And I think some really interesting things came out of it. They explored their imagination, and they came up with some million shapes. One of them kept on adding to his basic model to test it, to see whether it flies or not. Another girl who tried to put her spacecraft with other spacecrafts to see whether they can work together, also because they had done this using their body activity before, where they all tried to move together as one spacecraft. Yeah, so I think there's exploration with the medium you are comfortable with, and there's imagination, and which led to our third workshop where they had to illustrate their journey from their house to space, wherever. And I think there was a really personal sort of expression there because they had all made their spacecrafts and then they could use that to travel wherever. So I think it threw light on some very interesting things and it was a very good experience for them.
I think it was also interesting to see how a discipline like astronomy can throw up questions for them in other areas of science that they're encountering in school, particularly when they ask questions about plants defying gravity when we introduce gravity to them. And I think they also had some questions on evolution.
Yeah, they started talking about evolution when we brought up the whole idea of what created the planets, what put them there in the first place. And they switched suddenly from the planets to man. And they connected the whole story of creation together. So they made these really interesting jumps and connections between different subjects.
Yeah, there's another girl whose satellite had to go to the sun. Suddenly she realizes, no, it cannot go because it'll perish, and if it's too close to the sun. She was wondering what should the distance be, 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers.
But in the end, how did it wrap up?
So, just what we were talking about right now, the questions,
Yeah.
that was a very interesting and very helpful end for the whole process, I think, because we left them behind with a space of questions and where they understood that they could question anything. You start somewhere and you can go off in any direction, branch off in any topic. It doesn't have to be stick to astronomy like you were saying. It can go into philosophy, it can go into religion, whatever. So they actually made these connections and they asked these questions and kept alive this sort of spirit of inquiry that science should be about instead of just that textbook knowledge and this division of these really strict subjects.
Do you think somewhere it helped them to trust themselves more and all the inquiry and curiosity which they sit with in classroom?
Yeah, whether they use the trust, they're able to use it in the classroom or in their familiar spaces might take some time, but it's a good start for them to see that there's a space that welcomes their questions, and performance was able to do that because of its